Hello and welcome to AP Table Talk, a podcast where we explore board games and what makes them interesting to us. My name is Brian and I'm joined today by the founder of the University of Hartford's premier improv comedy group, Stop Laughing Mom, my cousin and co-host Dave. How's it going today, Dave?
I'm all right. You know, fun fact, I was at the University of Hartford 2 months ago and the group is still around.
Oh, nice.
They are still around. They're still performing.
Your legacy continues.
I guess, you know, one day I kind of want to go up there and just like take out the group for like lunch at a diner and then ask them about the history and see if they out me.
See if they do.
Yeah, but I don't think they will because that's like over 20 years ago now.
Right. Yeah.
So none of them are probably alive.
It came up. We were just talking. I'm cleaning out my basement here, and I found the shirt you got me.
The University of Hartford shirt or the Stop Laughing
Mom shirt. Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember giving you that unless it's an old shirt.
It's like the Ringer like 3/4 length sleeve one.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Nice.
Still got it. All right. So what's our mechanic today?
Okay, so this is actually a special edition of AP Table Talk because normally if you've listened to some of our past episodes, we only cover one mechanic. But when Brian and I were researching this particular episode, we decided to combine actually two mechanics together because they have a lot of overlap. So our two mechanics today, Brian, are both trick taking and ladder climbing. Those are our two mechanics.
Right. All right. So, I guess we'll start off with some definitions here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you my definitions. Okay, we'll start with trick taking.
Sure.
Okay, and before we get started, I know we talked about this last episode. Mm-hmm. Just as a quick apology to our listeners, you may get some extra coughing. It's that time of the season where my germ-ridden children bring home all kinds of stuff from school, so
they are filthy.
Bear with us.
Yeah.
Okay, so trick taking. Generally, I think of this in card games.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, each player on each player's turns, they play a card,
mm-hmm.
and then based on some criteria, usually highest card, somebody takes the trick of
mm-hmm.
cards,
mm-hmm.
And then they're able to either lead off, and sometimes there's other rules, like a trump suit, for example, is pretty common, where if you're playing with a standard deck of cards, like spades might be the trump. So if you usually have to follow suit, but if you don't have that suit, you can play the trump suit and
mm-hmm.
you'll win the trick.
Yep.
So that's generally my outline of how I would define trick taking games.
Yeah. Well, I think you're pretty close there.
Should I go on to ladder climbing, or do you want to do the official trick taking definition? Maybe do the official.
Yeah. Let's do that. So I'll read. So Brian just defined his personal definition of trick taking, which is pretty close to the definition that's on Board Game Geek, BGG.com. So I'll read that definition. So on the website, under trick taking as a board game mechanic, it says, quote, trick taking, players play cards from their hand to the table in a series of rounds or quote unquote tricks, which are each evaluated separately to determine a winner and to apply other potential effects. The most common way to win a trick is by having the card with the highest value of the suit that was led, but many classical card games use the quote unquote trump system, where a certain card, usually those of a designated suit, will win the trick if they are played. So occasionally there is a round of bidding to determine this trump suit. But in many trick-taking games, though not all of them, players are required to follow suit. So I think that's something that you didn't bring up before, Brian. By following suit, we mean play a card of the same suit that was led if they have one. If they do not have a matching card, they must play another card from their hand. And I think another important element here is that with trick-taking games, cards are played sequentially, not simultaneously. So that's the definition for trick taking off of Board Game Geek.
Yeah, and I think being, and this maybe applies to both of these mechanics,
mm-hmm.
being kind of older game mechanics, there are many variations, and slight changes to the rules based on the game. So
mm-hmm.
I can even following suit. I think I'm sure there's games where you don't need to follow suit and things like that. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to ladder climbing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, again, I mostly think of this in card games. So in this one, again, players take turns going around in order and playing either a card or set of cards based on some sort of hierarchy, like the cards have to be played lowest to high, or they have to be played. The next card has to be played higher than the previous card, or there's some cards where you have to play higher poker hands and things like that. And basically, it goes around. And this time, instead of just one turn per round, you continue around until someone can't, or until no one else can play, and that last person who can play is the winner, and usually takes that round and leads off the next.
Yeah. Again, really close there. I'm going to read the official definition from Board Game Geek. So under Board Game Geek, it says ladder climbing, players play one card or a set of related cards. So that's what Brian said before. And then subsequently, players must play cards of an equal or higher value of the same set already played. But that kind of differentiates, because some games allow an equal value, whereas other games you need to play an objectively higher value set in order to climb the ladder.
Or I wonder if they mean an equal set. Like if you play pairs, you have to play
another
higher pairs.
Pair. Yeah, it has to be a pair, but it has to be a better pair.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's possible that you can play equal, but I don't know if I can think of one where you can play the same.
Yeah, I can't. I did a lot of research. We did a lot of research on this.
That could definitely be a variant. So
yeah, that's true. Well, we'll save that for later, because we'll talk about some variants. But the rest of the definition says the last player to successfully play wins the right to start a new round of climbing. This mechanism originated in East Asia and is represented by modern games such as Tichu. So that's one of the games that we will, or at least I'm planning on talking about today.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we will move on to some examples then, I guess, and we will do our roll for initiative. Do you want to explain it? Give our little explanation.
Yeah. So if you are listening to AP Table Talk for the first time, one of the things that Brian and I like to do is we both have D20s, and we're both going to roll them at the same time. And whoever rolls higher is going to have initiative, and that person is going to lead off that part of the discussion. So I'm ready to roll, Brian, when you are.
Ready when you are.
3, 2, 1, roll.
I got a 12.
I have 5. So you have initiative.
All right. Okay. So the first section we have here is what we consider to be the most noteworthy or the biggest game in the category, which I guess what do you want to do? Do you want to go through all the trick taking, or do you want to go through both of the ones for each section?
Let's go through both of the ones for each section, because I've listed them in sort of like a thematic relationship to each other.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. So I would say that the most noteworthy trick taking game would have to be the Crew. It just, now what makes it big for me, I've talked about this before on the podcast. I generally am not a huge fan of cooperative games. And I think you introduced the Crew to me, I don't know, a year or two ago, during the holidays, I think. And it's a cooperative trick taking game. You're trying to win tricks, based on certain criteria. It's kind of it's almost like a legacy game, right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
They give you certain criteria, and you have to, as a team with limited communication, you have to win tricks that resolves the certain criteria for the missions. And I don't know, I had a lot of fun with it. The rounds go by really quick. Yep. There's definitely a variance in how difficult missions can be. The player count, I think, has a big part in that.
Yeah, definitely.
But I thoroughly enjoyed it. Myself and my brother Chris, who we've talked about before, also much prefers competitive games. We really enjoyed it. Do
you remember how I introduced it to you, though?
No, I don't, actually.
I said, I was like, I have a game called The Crew. It's a cooperative game, but it's a cooperative game for people that don't like cooperative games. Because if we discussed it on the podcast before, so I was like, I guess the Eng side of the family were very competitive internally, and we do not like cooperative games. Like, under no reason will we cooperate with each other. But The Crew, I feel like, broke that stigma. Yes. I don't think I'm alone here. Like, it's a great cooperative game to play. And
I think part of that is this people with any sort of interest in the board gaming scene, I think, are well aware of this game. It was very popular when it came out. It continues to be pretty popular. There's the second version of I think the Deep Sea one is the second one, right?
Yeah.
I was talking to Chris about it after we had played that first night, and we were talking about how we liked it even though it was cooperative. And what we realized, or at least what we think it is that we did not treat it as a cooperative game. We both like to solve. So when it comes to games, I treat them as you're solving a problem, right? Each game, the way to win, you solve the problem and the way to win, which is I like strategy games, things like that. And what the crew allows you to do, because you have limited control and limited communication with the other players, we just consider it solving a puzzle where the other people in the game are just pieces of the puzzle. They're not your teammates. And that's exactly how we had both approached it. And I think that's why we enjoyed it.
I do remember you talking about that. We're basically you're just orchestrating our actions to solving the game, right?
So yeah, I would think that is definitely the biggest trick-taking game.
Yeah.
What is you want to do your trick-taking one now?
Actually, why don't you do your trick-taking and ladder, and then I'll do mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for ladder climbing game is actually not a game I have played. I've watched some reviews, and I know it's pretty popular, and I think I want to try it out, but I haven't had the opportunity yet. It's also a newer, a modern game called SCOUT. And I know that was another one that I think it's around the same time it came out, and it was another one where people just were like, this is it. This is the ladder climbing game, and everybody was playing it. I haven't had the chance yet. And I think the kind of the gimmick in that one is, so the one mechanic that it does have that I don't like is I think you're required to keep your cards in your hand in order. Yep. Just by the honor system, which, not that I'd break this, but I find it hard to not immediately shuffle the cards in my hand, rearrange them. The other game that was ruined because of that for me is it called Bonanza?
Yep. Yeah. Bonanza.
Yeah. My wife's stepbrother introduced me to that one, and I couldn't stop rearranging the cards in my hand. So that'll be tricky for me, but I'd like to try them. But I know that one is pretty big game, and I would say that's probably the biggest one for ladder climbing.
Nice. Well, I'm really glad, Brian, you went first, because I'm going to tell you about my favorite trick-taking, or not favorite, most noteworthy and biggest ones. So I think that it's important for me to differentiate first that I'm not going to talk about Hearts and Spades, which I feel like are it's classic trick-taking games. Spades was technically the first trick-taking game I learned.
Right.
But I'm not going to count it for this one, because we're really going to cover board games, card games, tabletop games here. So based on what I've heard, and I have not yet had the privilege of playing it yet, though, is Tichu. So Tichu, I think, is the go-to example for ladder climbing games, but I have not played it, specifically because Tichu, you need 4 players. No more, no less. You need 4 players. However, there's 2 games that are influential in this sphere for their modernity and also their relevance right now. And they're exactly the 2 games that you said. The number one for me is The Crew, in that I don't think prior to The Crew, at least I have not experienced it as a really well done, elegant, cooperative trick-taking games. There are a few other cooperative trick-taking games. I can think of 2 off the top of my head. But I feel like The Crew really shines in its ability to play fast, play quickly, play casually, and be super modular. I don't know if you remember when we started playing, but we basically just played the first mission, and it was like, oh, that's it? I mean, we did fail it a bunch of times because not all the players... I think
it's a good way to just learn the rules. It's a good introduction to just learn the rules, which, I mean, I think we're going to get into that a little bit more later in this episode. But definitely. But I think it actually... as simple as it is for, we're gamers, we pick up these games pretty quickly. As simple as it is for us, it helps out newer players, and it's quick enough that seasoned players, that's fine. You're not going to get bored. It's like a couple minutes per like mission. So and that's what I really like about the game. There's just a book full of missions that get increasingly more complex and difficulty. So I think the difficulty for experienced players plays well. And like you said before, Brian, I think you're right about it being kind of a legacy game, because it does benefit by playing with the same people multiple missions in a row. Right. And I know people have talked about treating it like a campaign and just, I'm going to play with this group now. So we start at mission 1 and we'll play with mission 1, this group. And I like I always like theme in my games. So I like that the missions are broke up with story and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really well done. As simple as it is, it's very well done. And, you know, I'm just going to go on a tangent here and sorry to take away from your turn here, but you mentioned a couple other, and we both kickstarted a game that I was interested in because people compared it to The Crew and said it was basically a good 2-player version of The Crew, which is Sail.
Yep. Yeah.
Now, I haven't had a chance to play that yet. I know you've played it, but how
I've
would
not
you
played it yet.
Sorry, I thought you had played it.
No, I own it as well because I think we backed it at the
okay.
same time, but I have not gotten on the table yet.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you had played it, but we have since played on Board Game Arena, and I did not know about. I guess is it a semi-official or an official variant? But there's a of The Crew, the Jarvis variant.
Oh, that's right,
which,
our 2-player,
which is
game.
for 2 players, and I feel that. I mean, I'm hoping that I will like that Sail game. It has good reviews as well, but I feel that had I known that The Crew had, I feel that system works well enough that I might just get The Crew anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's just a really good game. It's very inexpensive, and I like it a lot. I'm assuming it works with the second one too, but I mean, I haven't got through all the missions in the first one, so
yeah, me neither.
There's no rush to go grab it. I don't think it's going anywhere because of how successful it is. So
yeah, that's true.
But sorry, you can go back to what you were saying.
Well, those are all really good points, but it leads me to my second point here, which is I had the same significant ladder climbing game, which is Scout.
Right.
And like you said, Brian, with Scout, it's true. One of the constraints in the game is that you cannot rearrange your cards. However, they do have asymmetric numbers on them. So if you fan them out and see the numbers on one side, if you flip it over and fan them out, those are different numbers on the other side. So you cannot rearrange the cards, but you can choose which side you're going to start on. So you may have a really forgiving side that you may start on. And I think that saved me in a bunch of games where when I first get it, it's not a good hand, but I flip it over and it's still not a great hand, but it's better than the other hand. And I think that's one of those aspects where they innovated on ladder climbing and kind of, like added a new mechanic and a new setting that made it something new.
Yeah, that definitely sounded like I do want to try it. And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is when you get a card, you are able to place it into your hand wherever you'd like.
Correct. Yeah, that's the only time when you can
that
do so.
Might help save it for me too, because I think in Bonanza, you're just drawing and keeping them in order. And it was just driving me insane.
Yeah, well, Bonanza has an exception.
I mean,
there
it's a different game, but
But Bonanza is a trading game. So when you play Bonanza, you want to trade out cards because they may be in an inopportune position in your hand. So that's an incentive to trade.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So we had we both had the same ones there, but I mean, it's hard to really object to those as being like the biggest and most noteworthy in the genre. So.
Yeah, that's at least by when this episode was recorded, that's what was most noteworthy. Yeah.
All right. So we will move on to the first games we played with these mechanics. Okay. So for trick taking, and you said it as well, I'm sure that either Hearts or Euchre were the first trick taking games that I played. I actually haven't played Spades. I think I had already known Hearts, and I think Spades is just a simpler version.
Yep.
So I'm going to name maybe lesser known variants, because if we're talking about first games, I mean, I don't think there was much that I knew back when I was playing these, because this would have been, those were school cafeteria games or like playing as a kid, family event kind of things. So I definitely played a lot of Euchre, especially in the cafeteria in high school and stuff. And then I learned a variant of, I guess it's a variant of Euchre. I mean, it's not quite Euchre, but it's called 952. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No.
It has many other names, apparently, because I went to go kind of look it up to remind myself of the rules a little bit. Apparently, this particular variant called 952 is the Canadian variant, surprisingly.
It's covered in maple syrup.
So it's 3-player Euchre, in the sense that it follows most of the Euchre rules for trick taking. But the difference is you use your full deck of cards, your full 52, You deal them out, except for 4. And then the dealer chooses trump. The last 4 cards go into a kitty.
Mm-hmm.
And then the dealer picks trump based on the cards they have.
Mm-hmm.
And then takes those 4 cards and can discard 4 cards. And then you go around and you play all the tricks.
Mm-hmm.
And the 952 comes in that the dealer, having most of the power, is trying to get 9 tricks.
Mm-hmm.
The net player to his left is trying to get 5, and the final player is trying to get 2 tricks.
Mm.
And then at the end of the round, you get a plus minus based on how far you are off from those goals.
Mm-hmm.
And usually you play to like plus or minus 15.
Mm.
And then after each round, though, whoever's the most negative. No, wait, I'm messing up these rules here. Sorry. The dealer also picks trump, gets a kitty, but the other players have to give their best trump card to the dealer.
Mm-hmm.
And the dealer can trade out whichever card they want.
And can you just clarify, because I've heard it in other games before, the kitty is a discard pile or a common pile?
So you deal out all the cards, and the last 4 kitty's just like extra cards basically. So there'll be 4 cards left.
Mm-hmm.
Those go in the middle, so everyone can look at their cards, but they don't know what those 4 are. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit of unknown information, I guess.
Yep.
And a little bit of an advantage because the dealer has to take so many tricks.
Mm-hmm.
So they can name their trump based on what they can see, pick up those 4, and then they have to discard 4 out of their hand. Mm. So it just lets them prune their hand a little bit more.
Mm. Okay.
So that's one that we played a lot of. I think that was at, I think I actually learned that with Chris at when I was working at Citibank with him.
So this is your 952 is your first trick taking game?
I mean, outside of the Euchre and Hearts, that's the first one I can really remember.
I see.
Specifically as a trick taking game.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Well, what about your ladder game? First ladder game.
Okay, ladder climbing game again. It is kind of a classic. It goes by many names. Mm-hmm. Another cafeteria game. I think the more PG name is President. Mm-hmm. We called it A-hole.
Yeah.
I think that one's. I don't know how popular that one is. Because it didn't show. I kept it on here because it didn't show up very high, or I couldn't find it in BGG very high. So I assume it's lesser known.
Yeah.
So it's pretty simple. It can be played with almost any number of players. You just add more decks of cards. Mm-hmm. I think we used to play in high school with like 12 people.
Oh, wow.
And you just dish out all the cards, and somebody takes lead, who would be the president usually. Mm-hmm. They play. So you can play singles, doubles, or pairs, 3 of a kind, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then everyone has to, as we talked about in the mechanic, you have to follow that number of cards, but play higher, or you can go up to another. Like you can go from pairs to 3 of a kind until someone can't play anymore. And the goal is to shed all your cards first. Okay. Whoever is the first one to shed all their cards becomes president. Yeah. The next one becomes vice president, and so on. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, I'll use I think some variants call it scum. So on the other side of it, the last person to get rid of all their cards is scum, and you have vice scum. And then in the next round, whoever was scum has to give their best 3 cards or best 2 cards or whatever it is and exchange that with the worst cards from the president. And vice does 1 card, switch with the vice on the other side. And you just keep going. I don't even know. We would just play that continuously. I don't even know what the goal, like where that game ends.
The goal is to just keep playing it continuously.
Yeah, I think we would just play until our lunch was done.
Yeah. Nice.
So those are my 2 first, the first ones that I remember significant ladder climbing and trick taking games.
Got it. Well, I think we had similar history here. I know that you talked about hearts and spades. If I had to go with the very first one, it would definitely be spades for me. It's my first trick-taking game. But I can tell you, the first time I learned it, I was very, very, very confused. And I was like, how can you get away with just breaking the rules in this game? Like, if I just say I don't have that, I could just play any card, right? So at the time, I didn't really understand the dynamics of the game and how it worked. But I also was still like kind of a novice with tabletop games and board games in general. So I would have to say, out of modernity here, my first trick-taking game is called Skull King. Are you familiar with Skull King, Bri?
Nope. I don't think I know that one.
So Skull King is, again, it has that same simplicity as Presidents that you were talking about before. Skull King is by Grandpa Beck's Games. It's a very small, like, footprint card game. It's great in that it has, like a clear hierarchy of what cards beat what, but there's also some like loopholes, like you could play like, I forget the names of this individual cards, but like pirates will beat this card unless there is a mermaid in play. Like anyone can play a mermaid, in which case it's reversed. Then pirates are actually lower on the rank than something else. So it's interesting in that regard. You can, out of all of the modern games I played, I would say that is the first trick-taking game I played. I've been trying to acquire a copy. It's just very nice. It has a lot of replay value, and a lot of people have played it in the past. My first ladder climbing game, which again we're combining for this episode, trick-taking, ladder climbing, because they have a lot of crossover here. Ladder climbing also has a lot of crossover with card shedding, which is something we did not include for this episode, but is still an important mechanic. Unironically, my first ladder climbing game is a card game called Ladder 29. Have you heard of that game?
I haven't heard of that one either.
So it's very on the nose because it's a ladder climbing game about firefighters, and the score track is you climbing the ladder to play sets of cards like pairs, straights, a full house, four of a kind, etc. But like Skull King, they do have some specialty cards in it, which I think makes the game interesting. And it also has like goal cards in it, which means that like you can you gain the points on the goal card if you're the first to go out, but you also have a handicap. So it means, like, I remember some of the cards being like, you can never play three of a kind, but if you go out first, you're going to get 9 points as opposed to 6 points for normally going out. So those are my two. First trick-taking game would be Skull King, trick-taking game in modernity. And my second one, which is my first ladder climbing game, Ladder 29.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, those are not ones I've heard of. I have to go look those up.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Okay, so we will move on to our favorite games in these two mechanics. So for trick-taking games, this is another more recent acquisition for me. And one called Cat in the Box. I think you were here when I got it, actually.
Yep.
So this is a twist, again, very euchre-like, except it's not teams. You're playing on your own. Mm-hmm. And the catch with this one is that the cards don't have suits on them. Mm-hmm. You determine the suit when you play the card. Mm-hmm. And what I really like about this one, I mean, theme is a big one for this. They very much play up the Schrodinger's cat thing in this, and I'm a physics nerd, so I like that. As you play your cards, they have a board to keep track of the cards that are played, and you put your token in the number and suit that you've defined your card as you play it, and you're trying not to create a paradox. You're trying not to be the one who creates the paradox.
Paradox is going to happen regardless.
Yeah, generally the paradox will happen, which is when you are forced to play a card that can't exist based on the other cards that have played. And by that we mean, so at any point, because your cards don't have suits, I think red is always trump in that game. So you can lead whatever suit you want, but at any point you can just say, well, I don't have that suit, so this card is red, so it's trump, and you can take it. But by declaring that you no longer, let's say, have blue, you now can no longer play blue cards. So you can't say that any of your cards that are in your hand are blue anymore. And I just find that really interesting in an interesting game. I've definitely never seen that done before, where you just kind of determine on the spot, but then it actually, the act of declaring what you have changes what's in your hand. Changes the weight of what's in your hand, which I thought was really neat. Not for everyone, I don't think. I played it with a couple different groups, and some like it, some are just, I think you have to already be familiar with trick taking. Otherwise it might be a little too much at once.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
So that's my trick-taking game.
Mm-hmm. And your ladder?
Now, my ladder climbing game is a little older, actually quite a bit older, and you mentioned it earlier, and I did not know the name of it until recently. And I may not have been playing it by the full proper rules because someone just introduced it to me, and maybe we were playing a variant of it, but it's Tichu, actually.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
I think I played this in university, but we played with a regular deck of cards. My understanding is that there's some extra cards in a real Tichu deck, but so we didn't have those. But essentially, it is a ladder climbing game played in teams, kind of like the Euchre setup. You sit across from your teammate. It's a 4-player game. And again, you're trying to shed your cards. The hierarchy here, what I liked was it goes by poker hands, which was neat. I had not seen that. That was kind of different. Generally, it's always the pairs and singles or even straights, things like that. But so this was, it used all that you can do, full houses, all kinds of stuff. But the team thing was interesting because at the beginning of each round, each player has to pass a card to the player on their left and the player on their right, which are your opponents. So there becomes this little bit of a meta where you generally come to an agreement that you always pass. We did. I think you always pass odd cards to your left and even cards to your right. And the reasoning behind that is if you and your partner, you don't know what you're passing, but if you generally want to pass low cards, but if we both pass like 2s to the same player, we've now given them a pair.
Yeah.
So by making sure you're doing even and odds, you're trying to not give them better cards instead of your worst cards or whatever. But so yeah, there's an interesting dynamic there, and it kind of had that euchre feeling because you're playing with limited information with a teammate. Yeah. It also had some betting in it, or at least we played with betting. I think the real game has betting. In that, so you can declare when you get your cards, you can declare Tichu. We didn't say Tichu. That's why I didn't know the game. I forget what we said, and basically you're saying that you are betting that you're going to be the first one out. Okay. And you get a bonus 100 points or something like that. And there's an even harder thing to do is when you're dealing out the cards, you deal out the first 8 cards to each player first, and you wait. And you look at your 8 cards, and you can say, I think in Tichu, it's Grand Tichu. And if you declare Grand Tichu, by looking only at your first 8 cards, you're saying that you can get out first without the rest of the information of what the rest of your hand is going to be. Wow. And if you can do that, you get 200 points, I think, on top of whatever the points is. And then you play it at whatever, like 1500 or something like that. Wow. Yeah. And there's other points you get for, depending on when you get out, however many cards the other team has left and stuff like that. So nice. So yeah, it was an interesting euchre-like ladder climbing game instead of trick taking.
Well, now I really want to play Tichu. It's been talked about in many circles, and it's been on my want to play list for a while. But it just sounds really interesting, especially that whole
I need to find out what those other cards do. I think there are like 4 special cards that do something. So
yeah. All right, so I'm going to go into my favorite trick taking and ladder climbing games. I think that one of the aspects that I consider for my favorites is that it's going to be played around multiple player accounts, specifically if the game is designed for a specific player account, or if it plays well at like a higher player count or a lower player count. For me, I really like games that are able to spread out their player count. And I know that there are going to be trick-taking games that are optimized for 2 players and games that are optimized for more than 2 players, so that so long as you've made that differentiation, outside of that, I want it to scale well. So that goes into my first one, which is my favorite trick-taking game, which Brian and I have been playing a lot on Board Game Arena right now, which is Twin Palms, which I backed on Kickstarter, and I really like because there's essentially only 3 suits in the game. All of those suits have 1 wild, and then they all go from 1 to 10, and the suits have a rank order, and basically it's like any pair of twin palms, and any number is like the quote unquote trump, and it goes down from there. And I really like the simplicity. Although Brian and I talked about this before we started recording, The only thing I would be critical about with the game is that there is a runaway leader aspect to it, which is if you get, especially two players, which is what we've been playing, if you get a very good lead early on in the game, you basically need to do nothing for the rest of the game, and you can just lean on the other player to prevent them from getting points. So I'd say that's the only negative aspect to it.
Right. And that problem might only exist in the two player. Because you may be able to get enough points from the other players when there's more than two. I've only played it with you at 2 players, so.
Yeah. I played it at all player counts, but I still think it plays well at 2 players. It's just that it's if you get behind, it's not likely you will catch up in Twin Palms. My favorite ladder climbing game is a game that we already mentioned before, which is SCOUT. It's by Oink Games, which I'm a big fan of that publisher. I like that it's a small box design. I feel like it's a very intuitive but also interesting game design, specifically with not being able to rearrange the cards in your hand. You're climbing up the ladder, which is a familiar mechanic, and it's just it's a nice game to play, and you get a real sense of euphoria for playing a better like a better set than your opponents and going out first. And I just think at least since the recording of this episode, it is my favorite ladder climbing game out there because of its simplicity and how fun it is to play.
Yeah, I definitely have to try that one out. So maybe our next time we're together, make sure you bring that one.
Yeah, I've got that.
We can get one in there. Because I mean, again, there's some mechanics that kind of push me away from it, but I got to try it. Like it's definitely enough people like it that I got to at least try it. So.
Yeah. But again, at least 3. You can't.
Yeah, that seems like it would play better with more players. So
yeah, it's better. Yeah, it's better with more players. I'd say 5 is the optimal, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so that is our major examples of our double episode here today.
Yep.
So we'll move on to the we don't have a catchy name for this section, but the aspects of the mechanics.
Yeah, so starting with the last episode, what Brian and I are trying to do right now is we will find common aspects about this mechanic, and then we're going to discuss those particular aspects in order here. So I believe, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, I've got 6 different aspects we're going to cover today for these 2 mechanics.
Correct. Yeah,
is that right?
That's what I got. But.
And are we also going to lead off with initiative here with a new roll?
Yeah, I'm ready to roll here when you are.
All right, so 3, 2, 1, roll.
All right.
I have 14.
I got a natural 1. So
natural 1.
Yeah, critical fail. So,
all right. So shared aspect number 1 that we're going to discuss is easy to learn and accessible rules. So we talked about this before, and I think this is a debatable fact that trick-taking games are easy to learn if you have already played other trick-taking games before.
Right.
Because
the trick-taking itself can be difficult. I think because, again, I played a trick-taking game when I was so young that it's just an inherent mechanic for me.
Yep.
So it's hard for me to empathize when people are just learning it. But once you know the trick-taking, I think that all the small variations off of that are minor in comparison.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So you can pick up many other games once you learn the basics of the major mechanic being trick-taking.
Yeah. That's what I wrote down here in my notes. So, like, you need to know common vernacular with trick-taking games. And I think those common words I've written down here are like the lead, following, a trump suit, must play, because tricks, Well, there's must play too, right? Because there's some trick-taking games where if you have a card of that suit, you have to play it, whereas in others you don't have to.
I think that's harder for younger players of like kind of an honor system in requiring to follow suit and things like that. You just have to know that that's the game and you have to do it. And again, it just becomes natural if you played a lot of those games. But I can understand why, if you've never been introduced to that, it would take a bit to kind of understand those rules right away.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I go back to my instance with spades. When I first learned that, I was like, what prevents me from just cheating right now? Because I don't really know why I wouldn't just play off the rules. But my example here for easy to learn and accessible rules is actually a card game I had turned to right as the pandemic started, when we were all just sequestered at home, is The Fox in the Forest. Are you familiar with that game, Brian?
I am. Yes. Yeah.
So that's a two-player trick-taking game. Brian brought up Sail before, SAIL, which is also a two-player trick-taking game. That is a cooperative game. The Fox and the Forest is a two-player competitive trick-taking game. And I think that if you're going to start with trick-taking with someone that's never played trick-taking games before and doesn't want to play something like Hearts or Spades or Euchre or anything else like that, Fox and the Forest would be my go-to as a shining example for easy to learn and accessible rules. How about you, Brian?
Yeah, I think Fox and the Forest is a good starter one, especially if you're just learning. If it's like two people just learning, you don't really want to have a big group and trying to learn something like that. I think it's simple. It's a quick game. I think that's like a perfect gateway for trick-taking games.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. How about you?
Yeah, I think we kind of said it kind of the same. The trick-taking itself can be difficult for some people to pick up, but once you understand that, it kind of opens up many variations. And I mean, it's been around for quite some time, trick-taking, so it's just in there in a lot of games, which for gamers, maybe it's one of those things that makes them annoying explainers because they just don't understand why you can't understand trick-taking. but
it is difficult. If you've never played a trick-taking game before, to wrap your head around it, it's not easy.
Right. And I think you explain games more often, so you've probably seen it more where people are having difficulty kind of understanding the concepts of trick-taking.
Very often.
Yeah. All right. Should we move on to, I've got quick to play.
Sure. I will lead off on this one.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So on quick to play, like you said before, I agree. Trick taking is an easier mechanic to learn, especially if you played other trick takings before, because there's generally lower complexity. Usually with trick taking games, you're looking at cards, and those cards are going to have two values. You're looking at suits, and you're looking at numbers on the card. So those values there. Same thing with ladder climbing games. However, now you're usually combining cards with different suits and different numbers to form like melds or sets or whatever you'd like to call it. So you brought this up before because you're saying about like me teaching games. I teach games often, usually a few new games to the same group of gamers each week. And I can say the shared aspect number 2 here for quick play, the easiest trick-taking game that I've ever explained, I picked up at the last PAX Unplugged. 1, because I was on deep discount, and 2, just had really cute art. Brian, have you heard of this game called Gudetama, the Tricky Egg card game?
No, I have not.
Are you familiar with Gudetama? Because I was not familiar with Gudetama.
No.
Gudetama is apparently this Japanese, and apologies to everyone out there that's listening that's a Gudetama fan, but it's a Japanese anime about an egg, like a yolk in an egg, that just has an attitude. Basically, all the cards are like the egg, like sitting on an avocado or sitting on a sandwich or sitting on like a frying pan, just like saying really snarky things, basically. If you're looking for a highly thematic card game about Gudetama, this is not the game for you because the theme ends there. It is just cards with Gudetama saying snarky things on the cards. But what is easy to teach about this game is that like what I just said before, where there are suits and values, this game only has values on the cards, numbers 1 to 14.
Right.
And this may anger some people that I would say are trick-taking purists, but in Gudetama, each round is made up of a series of 9 tricks because everyone gets dealt 9 cards. And then you play tricks like you normally would. Someone leads, and then you have to follow. However, the follow is contextual, meaning that if I play a 5, Brian, if you're going to go after me, you have 2 options. You can play a 5 from your hand. You can play any card that's higher than a 5. Or if you can't do either of those, you have to play the lowest card in your hand. And the reason you're doing this is because, and this is a common misconception online that I'll address in a moment, is that people say that the 8 tricks leading up to the last trick don't matter. Because only on the last trick matters, because whoever wins that last trick is going to use the card in their hand that they won. Say it's like a 14.
Right.
They're going to put it in front of them and you get 14 points, but points are bad. You want to have the least number of points in Gudetama.
Okay.
So, people say like, why am I playing these 8 tricks? I'm just trying to, only the last trick matters. And it's like, no, the tricks leading up to it is curating your hand so that when you play the last trick, you do not win it because you don't want to win it.
Right.
And there's some variations here, but like I have yet to find a trick taking game that is easier than this to teach because it has no suits. It only has values and it only has those 2 rules. How about you, Brian?
Yeah. Again, one of the things that I like about trick taking games is that they are quick to play. And now, I mean, I'm going to speak to these now as someone who does understand trick taking. But generally, if you're playing with a group of people, trick taking game, and everyone knows about trick taking, like those rounds are going to go quick. Those turns are going to go fairly quick. It's usually you can make those decisions pretty quickly when it's your turn. You usually have your options limited before the other players have played. So when it comes around to your turn, it's like down to like a couple options anyways. And that's definitely something that is a big positive about trick taking for me. And ladder climbing, maybe not quite as quick as trick taking because of the fact that you kind of have to look at different combinations that could be in your hand. But generally, if you're playing with people that are familiar with the mechanics, it's also pretty quick as well. And I just find it just keeps you engaged and it helps, especially with larger player count. Larger player counts that you're not waiting forever for your turn. It's just moving around quick. There's only so much information you need to see as it's going around too, even though it's going quickly, that it's fairly easy to kind of keep up with that as it's going around.
Right. Yeah. So for shared aspect number 3 that Brian brought up before, competitive and solo, we discussed this before, at least on our side of the family. The Eng family is a very competitive group. And I feel that with trick taking and ladder climbing games, that competitiveness shows because you're always comparing yourself against others. And I feel like no matter what trick taking game or ladder climbing game you're playing, initiative is important because you gain more information by playing later, or you have initiative in order to go out first if it's a card shedding game, which is often combined with ladder climbing games. Although, and before I bring up my game, Bri, this aspect is called competitive and solo. Do you know any solo trick taking and ladder climbing games, or do you want to save it for your response here?
I think there is a solo variant also for the crew. Because when I was looking up the rules for the 2-player variant for the Jarvis variant for the crew, I think I saw a document for it. I didn't go and read it, but I think there is one for that game. Ladder climbing. No, I'm not off the top of my head. I can't think of one.
Oh, okay.
It's generally competitive or cooperative or team based. There's actually quite a bit of team based.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. Which is also funny because we don't like team based games.
Yeah, well, that's just half cooperative. So.
Exactly. But under competitive aspects, and I think regardless, I think a common element for all trick taking and ladder climbing games is the competitive aspect. But one game I recently picked up as a gift is do you know the game, Brian, Taco Cat spelled backwards by the people who put together Exploding Kittens?
Yeah, I think I do know that one. I've never played it, but I think I'm aware of that one, yeah.
I was on deep discount at the Marshalls I went to, so I felt compelled to buy it, mostly for myself, but I've since gifted it now. But essentially, when I was reading the rules, which is a very small pamphlet, it is essentially like a trick-taking game because you're just comparing values for cards. And again, initiative is going to be important. But it combines this tug-of-war aspect where, like when you're going to play rounds, one round is made up of a series of tricks, and whoever wins the last trick is going to move like the token one space closer to them, which is like the tug-of-war aspect. And once it reaches one player's side, that player wins. So it's not billed as a trick-taking game, but based on the description and the rules and everything, that's essentially what it feels like. And it's one of those like small box games that is meant for 2 players, but is, I don't know if it's a benefit to not call it a trick-taking game, but I think it's one of those.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the rules. I've just seen it.
Yeah.
I think it shows up on like Amazon deep discount games too, so.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that my nephew, who I gifted it to, will open it on Christmas, and then we can play it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
So we'll move on to synergy with other mechanics.
Yeah, this is shared aspect number 4, synergy with other mechanics. So here I wrote that trick taking is a comparative example. You always have to evaluate units, those tricks in successive order. And we've talked about this with other examples here before. So this makes it that basic element for players to base their understanding on. So, like with action drafting, it's place a worker, take an action, etc. You brought this up before, Brian, where you were saying that it's relatively simple to follow along because you are communally resolving this one action. One player has led a card, and now we have to follow it and resolve all the way around the table. And once we do that, that trick is over, and then we move on to the next trick. I think like the way you compartmentalize information with taking games is very discreet. You can tell like this is the thing we're working on right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
to an extent, I would say if you're talking about things like euchre, you definitely want to more advanced play would be to that you're counting those cards as well.
Yeah. You should be tracking.
Definitely in hearts.
Yeah.
You want to count those hearts and see what's left out there, keep it in your head, that kind of thing. But generally speaking, what you have to keep track of is on the table.
Yeah, exactly. But this aspect is called synergy with other mechanics. And we've discussed this before, Brian, but I don't think you've played it since when I brought it up originally. But the game is called Brian Boru, High King of Ireland. Are you familiar with this game?
Yeah, you talked about it before, but I have not played it.
Yeah. So this is one where, again, once you know the mechanics of how trick-taking games work, Brian Boru is a trick-taking game. However, the winners and losers of tricks determine area control on a map, which I think is a really, really cool combination of these two mechanics because prior to this, we'll talk about it in a little bit, like this new renaissance of trick-taking games, I really hadn't seen trick-taking married with like area control. So I thought that was a really interesting aspect.
Yeah, I think that the success of the crew has led people to try and push it to combine it with other mechanics. Because I mean, I just think of the older games again, like a Haggis has bidding in with it. Tichu had bidding as well, in the sense that you're making that declaration that you're gonna go out first. It's kind of like bidding, but it's kind of like bidding and kind of like push your luck. I don't know what you would call it. But in hearts, where you have to either make that decision that you're going to try and take everything.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite of push your luck.
Yeah. You have to, how conservatively can I play?
Yeah. You play conservative until you're not playing conservative anymore.
Yep.
And but you don't want to, so for those who are not familiar with hearts, it's basic trick taking follows suit, and you're trying to get the least number of points. And every time you take a heart, each heart is worth 1 point. The only other card that is an exception is the Queen of Spades, is worth 13 points. And you play the full deck, and you're trying to take the least number of hearts, but everybody is trying to avoid them. If one person takes all of them, everyone else gets 26 points. Or is it everyone else gets, or you go down 26? I can't remember what it is. But
it's like it's the shoot the moon aspect where you can do so badly it's good.
Right. And so everyone's trying to avoid this, and they want to have all low cards so they don't take any tricks. But if everyone does that and one player has like a really good hand, well, they can just clean house and take everything and either punish everyone or reward themselves. And I always thought that was actually really interesting. It kind of reminds me of Blood Rage, the Loki strategy.
Oh, just killing your Vikings?
Of killing your Vikings and getting points for it and going into big battles and just getting points for causing chaos.
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, it's another twist on and addition. Again, I don't know what you would call that from a mechanic standpoint, but
yeah, no, I don't really have a name for it.
Yeah, sorry, I think I interrupted your.
No, that was it. That was it for number 4 for synergy with other mechanics for me.
Right. Yeah. I think bidding and bluffing is big in trick taking.
Yeah, we see that. That's a common element.
Like Twin Palms has bidding in it as well. I think the bluffing is a lot to do with, because a lot of trick taking, I think, is that control about whether or not you want the lead.
Yeah.
A lot of the times. And so you're kind of bluffing on whether you're playing your highest cards and trying to take a trick or trying not to take a trick and that kind of thing. So,
yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to replayability or repetitiveness.
Yeah. So this is shared aspect number 5,
number 5,
replayability and repetitiveness. So I don't know if it's hyperbolic for me to say that these games are infinitely replayable. I think that they definitely have a following based on like what you shared before about President, because you don't really keep track of points. You just kind of played it to pass the time. It's more of a pastime than anything else.
Right.
But I don't know if I could play like one of these trick taking or ladder climbing games ceaselessly, but I can always see myself coming back to them. And one of the games that I'm going to cite here that we've played a lot on Board Game Arena so far is Haggis, which is it's ladder climbing, but I think that there's enough in there and there's enough variety, even though the mechanics fundamentally don't change, where it's still interesting for me to play several different games in a row. How about you, Brian? What do you think?
Right. I agree. And I don't know if this is maybe something that's changed over time, because I definitely can sit there and play euchre every single day in the cafeteria in high school and not get tired of it. But I don't think that would be the case now. And I don't know if that's because all these other interesting games exist. And I think that can be mitigated a little bit in what we've seen with things like The Crew, where they give you the same mechanics to play, but each of the missions kind of gives you a little twist and keeps it interesting. And even though there's a lot of missions, but even though there's a finite number of missions, if each of those missions adds that you could play that mission 30 times, well, that's a huge extension to the life of that game.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think by adding that variability, you just extend that replayability. But again, we might just be spoiled because we play all these games. But if you don't if those games don't exist in your world and you have Hearts and Euchre, I did play those many, many, many times. Probably a lot more than I've played some of the games that I own now. Yeah. But that's what I had.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's just that they held interest or that's what existed then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go on number 6, our final one here, and which I think this is similar to our competitive and solo, or we covered it a little bit. And that is player count.
And number 6 works with a variety of player counts.
Right.
Yeah. So we covered this, and you talked about it, Brian, which is both trick taking and ladder climbing games. And I talked a little bit about scaling well to different player counts. There are going to be games that are for 2 players. There are going to be games for more players. There are going to be some games that will scale up higher, but there's like an optimal player count. However, I don't think that means that, again, games are not a monolith. There'll be some games that work with better, some player counts over others. So some of the best and most contemporary examples I have here is one game I've actually been playing a lot, Brian. I think that you'd really enjoy it because it's also by Oink, which published SCOUT. Do you know the game Tiger and Dragon?
No, I think I'm thinking of. It's not a trick taking game. I think I was thinking of, is it Lady and the Tiger or something like that?
That's a card game, but no, that's not it.
No, I think the title just made me think. I'm not familiar with
Tiger and Dragon. So I'll give you a quick overview, and I'll explain it to the listeners as well. But Tiger and Dragon is a not necessarily trick taking game. I would call it a card shedding game because you're trying to get rid of all of the cards in front of you, which are in this game it's tiles, so they look like mahjong tiles. But it's like you are a fighter in a dojo. And I think that this game plays best with 2 or 4 players. It plays up to 5, but I think 3 and 5 players are not good because it's best in teams or against each other. But the tiles are all odd and even numbers all the way up to 8, 1 through 8. All of the odd numbers are red. All of the even numbers are blue. And basically you are... and I think this is what's interesting about it. You're basically like fighting each other, but you're playing these tiles. So like, Bri, you could lead an attack. You'd be like, I'm going to attack you with a 7. And then all of the tiles are distributed in the deck according to their value. So if you play a 7, there's 7 tiles floating around somewhere. So then I can say, well, I'm going to defend your 7 by flipping over my 7. And I'm going to attack you with a 2. And then there's only 2 tiles in the deck. So if you can't defend against that 2, you got to pass and it comes back to me. Then I get to lead again. It's really, really good to play at 2 and 4 players. I think 4 is actually the best when you play in teams, because you talked about it before with the meta. You're like, okay, well, I think my teammate is on their way to they're gonna shed, and then you're gonna shed. 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 So I'm going to set this up to get them to shed, but then they'll like, choke last minute and we lose or something. But I'd say Tiger and Dragon is one of those games that it has a bigger scale for player counts, but it's really best at 2 or 4. You brought up Sailbri, which I unfortunately haven't played, but we both own, which is a 2-player cooperative trick-taking game that we haven't played yet. And then I also heavier cited the game Gorus Maximus, which is a trick-taking game, and it plays up to 8 players, but it is very, very chaotic at 8 players. But you said before you played President with like 12 players or with 12 people. But again, I don't know if you are really trying to keep score at that point. But for me, I think that there's so wide a variety of player counts here with trick-taking games and ladder climbing games that it's hard to section it into one area.
Right. Yeah. And one thing I think I do notice with the player count is that, especially with the trick-taking games, I think a game can be designed to work well at whatever the player count is. But I do notice for trick-taking, it generally 4 players. And I think it works particularly well in this 2 versus 2 team format. There's a lot of games where that just works well. And it's, again, I think it goes back to that your teammate is similar to what we talked about with the crew. Your teammate is kind of just part of you solving the puzzle because you have imperfect information. Yeah. You know that they're going to try and help you, but you don't know what they have, and you can kind of make some educated guess based on their plays. But generally, you're just using it's another puzzle piece, which I always find interesting. For varying the play, and maybe that's why games like Euchre can have that long life, because the variance of who your partner is and how they play can evolve over time. As you play with the same group and you kind of create these meta plays and things, and I'm sure that happens in Euchre and those older games too. So.
And you said it before, it's kind of like when we're talking about the crew where it is possible to track information if you just remember what cards are played, but it isn't always possible to track player intent, especially if you're trying to anticipate what they're going to do to help your team win. And that's, I think, an interesting challenge that a lot of people pick up on.
Yeah. And I mean, even that can even be a trap. Thinking about the crew, and I'm sure I can't think of a specific instance, but I'm sure it happened where you'll play a mission, and at one point someone will have to, go one way with a decision. Like usually it's, do I take this trick high or do I go low and pass off the lead? And they'll choose the wrong one for the situation. So the mission will fail. You play again. That situation might come up again. And now everyone is second guessing, is like, okay, well, do I do the same thing because then people know that that's how I play it? Or do I try and fix that and second guess what everyone else is thinking? And you get caught into this kind of, that trying to second guess and jump ahead, and are they second guessing? And that kind of thing. And that's the fun of, I guess, the limited communication.
Yeah. You want to move on to twists and variations?
Sure.
Okay. So are you rolling again for initiative?
Yes. We'll do our initiative. I'm ready.
3, 2, 1. Oh no. Critical fail. 1.
Okay. Oh, we a lot of critical. I got 17. So.
Crushed.
Okay. So I don't have a ton in this area. I feel that we covered kind of a lot of the variation just talking about different games, because kind of part of this is that trick taking and ladder climbing are kind of a very base mechanic. So all the games kind of vary off that. But just to go through some common variations to trick taking is the type of deck that you're using, whether that's your standard 52, a portion, like Euchre uses a portion of the 52 card deck, or a completely custom deck like Tichu is supposed to use, which I never played properly, or Haggis has its own cards.
Special deck.
Twin Palms has their own special deck, things like that. So that's one variation that is pretty common in the trick taking is that what is your deck composed of? Right. Should we just go back and forth here? Maybe you want to give one?
Sure. Or one of my twists and variations.
One of your twists or variations, yeah.
So we've talked about this in multiple AP Table Talk episodes right now, and I think that if you've listened to this show long enough, you'll know that I am a fan of seeing novel mechanics mashed up together. So again, for this one, because trick taking is such a simple, elegant mechanic, it really lends itself to being mashed up with other mechanics differently. There's this one game as of this recording that I think is the latest iteration in using trick taking in this way. Brian, have you heard of this game called My Favorite Things? It was on Kickstarter recently.
I think I saw the campaign, but I don't think I looked into it too much. The name sounds familiar,
right?
But go ahead and give us a summary.
Sure. So it was bundled with another game, but My Favorite Things is the one that really shine here because this combines flip and write and a party game with trick taking, which, to me, it just sounds insane because I'm like, how do you combine those things? But this is it. And I think, listen to it and tell me what you think about it because I thought it was very intriguing, which is, so you hand someone a deck of like 6 cards, and these cards are all numbered 1 through 5, and then one that has like a star, I think, on it. And then you give them like a category. Like if I were to give it to you, Brian, I'd be like, give me the category is favorite sci-fi movies. So then you, Brian, you would write in secret on a dry erase because you then put this card in a sleeve, your top 5 favorite sci-fi movies in order. So on the one card, you're number 1 all the way down to 5. And on the star card, you put actually a sci-fi movie you hate.
Okay.
So then after you write all that, you slide it back into the sleeve. So now all I can see is what you wrote, but not the number. Okay. And then this is what I think is interesting. You play a trick. So someone will lead off and be like, well, this person, because everyone's exchanging their cards with other players.
Right.
And it's like someone wrote, or someone just like throws down a card and just says pumpkin because their list of categories was like favorite pies. So now you're like, okay, well, is pumpkin their 5 or is it their 3? And then other players it's like pumpkin, and then like Ocean's 11, and then Alien Special Edition, and then you open up the cards to see who played the highest number. So if someone played the 5, they win the trick. But if someone played the star or the one that they hate of that category, they win the trick. So I was like, oh man, I hate it because I should have thought about this. This is genius, when I first thought about it. Because I'm like, how do you combine these things? This is how you do it. So I'm very excited to get that game in the mail.
Yeah, that sounds pretty fun. Yeah. That sounds pretty fun. I've definitely never heard of anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited. When I saw it, I was like, wow, genius. I'm so excited that someone has iterated on this.
All right. So the next one that I'll talk about here is kind of, and this goes to, my example goes to trick taking more specifically is kind of the goal of, in that, I mean, are you trying to take more or less tricks or all the tricks, or are you something that's different that I hadn't seen before in a game that we played on a board game arena, Jekyll versus Hyde. I don't know if you had played that before.
Yeah, I have the physical version too.
So I had not played that before, and it's a 2-player trick-taking game, and one player is Dr. Jekyll and the other is Mr. Hyde. And what I found interesting was the goals, the way they split the goals for them is that Dr. Jekyll is trying to keep the number of tricks equal between Mr. Hyde and Dr. Jekyll, whereas Mr. Hyde is trying to make it have a discrepancy, either lose all of them or win all of them.
Oh, now I know why I've been losing.
Oh, did you think you only went for winning?
I thought I was only going for one.
No, it's just
so I've been
about
playing the real game wrong
or
too.
discrepancy, which is that explains our last game. I think I had
rushed me.
I think I took all or gave you all or whatever. Yeah. But anyways, and that was interesting in that, again, it gives you that bluffing because you don't know if Mr. Hyde is going for taking all of them or taking none of them. Dr. Jekyll could be a little more reactionary when you're playing that because you switch so that it keeps it even or equal. But I thought that was really interesting. I don't think I've seen that where one side's trying to keep the hands equal and the other's trying to just make it as more
lopsided.
Usually it's one's going for you're either going for everything or going for nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that was interesting to me.
Well, now that I know how you play that game, I find that is very interesting because now I'm going to go into the next game and be like, okay, I know how to play this now. And so my variation here that I'm going to address is, I think I call this one less is more. So because trick taking and ladder climbing games are still relatively simple, like what is there anything you can take away from them that still like iterates on it? And you brought this up before, Brian, which is cat in the box, which is, you have the deck of cards with the values on them, but in keeping with the theme of paradox and the cat in the box, none of those valued cards have a suit. You identify what that suit is when you play it, which I think speaks to the theme. Yeah. So I kind of want to know, is there a way to like remove any of these like any of these aspects of these games and still have them work? Like for a ladder climbing game, I'm thinking, could you combine this with like Taco Cat spelled backwards, where it is more of a tug of war? It's not just constantly going up the ladder. Or if you could make it so that it's kind of like, like Raz is a type of poker. It's 7-card stud, but it's to play the worst hand of poker. It's not playing for a high card. So could you play a ladder climbing game where you're climbing down? Could you play a ladder climbing game where it is a tug of war mechanic or something else like that? I'd like to see what I'm sure you could take away.
I'm sure you could play one going down. That would just, I feel like that'd be very similar. But I think what would be interesting is finding a way to make it work where if it's teams or 2 players, something like that, one is trying to make it go up and one is trying to make it go down, or there is something tied to making it go up or down so that you have that as an option. Oh, do I want to save these lower ones for when I need to make it go down? Or I want to reduce it, but I don't want to reduce it too much because I don't want the other player to be able to make it go up. Yeah. That kind of thing. Yeah. I think could be explored for sure.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I don't know. I can't really think of any game that does exactly that right now, but if you are listening to this and are thinking about it, please do so.
Yeah, go design it and then publish it so that we can play it.
Exactly.
I don't have a lot here for Twists and Variations that we didn't really cover in our swing. So if you've got anything else.
Yeah, I just have one. And we addressed this before in passing, but I just want to talk about it right now. I really think that there's a renaissance in motion right now with trick-taking games. In that, again, it's an older mechanic, but as of the recording of this episode, I think, Brian, we both backed that same campaign with the 4 different trick-taking games bundled together: Pies, Mori, Bacon, and Lunar. Did you also back that?
I was going to, but I think I only wanted some of them, and I think I had a lot in my backlog of things I had just backed. So I didn't, but I knew that you were getting it. So
okay. Well, I guess I'm going to bring those up next time we see each other.
I think Bacon was the one I wanted to play, but
yeah, I mean, they're all trick-taking games, so I guess so long as we can get a third player, I think we're going to get them at the table.
Right.
But I want to know now, like, will there be a renaissance of other quote-unquote old mechanics like roll and move? Like which Monopoly is famous for rolling, and then you just move that many spaces.
I know. I mean, I think there has been a little bit for roll and rights.
Yep, that's true.
That those are flipping rights and rolling rights. Those have come up a little bit, but I think it just takes someone to refresh it in an interesting way. Yeah. And then all of a sudden people get these ideas because it's like, oh, I've kind of forgot about that mechanic and start thinking about it. Right. And it just takes that one to get big enough though, to kind of widespread. And I think that the crew had a major part in that. Yeah. Because it just was so popular.
Yeah. And still is popular. I mean, popular enough to have a sequel, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are all my twists and variations.
All right. Okay. So I wanted to just say something in here before we get to our outro. So we had, when we started doing this podcast and planning for it, we had kind of tried to figure out the mechanics we were going to go over. So we'd come up with these 6. And then we said, okay, let's do these. We'll see how it goes. And I mean, there's plenty of mechanics to go through, but I think I just wanted to put a call out here to any of our listeners. If there's something specific that you want us to cover, if there's aspects of what we talk about that you think are more interesting. Like, I know we've discussed our kind of twists and variations. I'm just going to say it, like, I've gotten a little bored with that segment of our podcast. So if there's a way that would be more interesting to the listeners, hop on the University XP website and send a message and let us know. Or if you're seeing this through the YouTube channel, put a comment in there and let us know what you want to hear. Yeah. It might take a bit for that to reach us because I think we got a backlog of what you're releasing for episodes. So when we get that or when this hits and we get that information, but for sure we would welcome that feedback. Yeah, that would be appreciative. Like, this was kind of like a communal brainchild of ours to put this together. But if you have some insight on, what would make a more useful episode, we'd be happy to hear it. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So I think that wraps up our trick taking and ladder climbing episode of AP Table Talk. If you'd like to hear more content like this, please be sure to subscribe. You can also check out more of our content, projects, and other information about us at universityxp.com. So thanks for joining us, everyone. We'd love it if you took some time to rate the show. Again, we live to lift others with learning, so if you found this episode useful, consider sharing it with someone who could also benefit. So until next time, game on.